And I'd like to give a warm welcome to John Johnson, Chair of the DDI Executive Board. John.
Hi, thank you very much, Jared. Well, welcome to everyone. It's good to see a few new faces for the annual meeting, new members and so on. So that's good to see people coming along. Um, well, without any ado, so just to say, if you can find the raise hand icon, which I can't at the moment, and you want to contribute or ask a question, please do so. If not, just interject um, if you can't find the raise button. So um, if there's a space, obviously not when someone's talking. Um, okay, all right. I suppose it's a bit of a tradition that someone has to talk about what's happened last year, and that's fallen to me this year. So um, yeah, just a few, I think, highlights of things that perhaps introduce the meeting. Next slide, please, Jared. Okay, just an update on membership. So we've had seven new members this year. Um, there's one partnership member in W3C. It's a result of long-standing engagement with the by the scientific board, sorry. Um, we've had five new associate members and one associate member, former full member that's converted to associate member. Um, and that's left us with, say, similar number of members as we had, full pay members as we had last year, and premium members as well. Uh, so one of the hazards of the of a membership organisation is a churn in membership. Um, and I think the case of ISA is one of those things where just organisations in the research space just disappear for, you know, not entirely good reasons in the case of IZA. But we um, but the Alliance does rely on membership dues to do its core activities. I would encourage members to um, encourage other organisations to join as well, um, when you can. Next slide, please. And it's just a breakdown of the membership profile in terms of where our memberships are. And, I think it's uh, something where I think the area of research is an area which we've been growing one for the Alliance. Um, and I think at the last meeting, last year, we've had the establishment of the official stats working group. So we're hoping that once they get up and running, that will attract some more members from the statistics organisations as well. And again, well, we picked up two new members, associate members in South America, which is really heartening. Um, but in general, we're still very much United States, sorry, Northern America and European dominated. So it's something I think that we want to try to engage with. Um, Good, which I'll come on to a bit later. Next slide, please. So over the year, the execs met, I think, 3 or 4 times. Um, the minutes are posted on the Alliance website as soon as we can get them done. So please do keep an eye out on there. I think they're mentioned elsewhere in communications anyway, but please do keep an eye on what we're doing. And obviously, if you're really obsessed, you can go and look at what previous things we've agreed and done. Um, Over the year, there's been three main things on funding, which is to support the exceptional items on funding, which is the DDI presence at the Dublin Core Conference, following up on the engagement we've had with them over the ISO process. And I think they're interested in certainly hearing what we're doing And I think we're going to be going to their conference again this year as well to maintain that level of engagement. Support for meetings for the ISO accreditation, which Dan's going to speak for to a bit later, and continuing support for the UNECE activities, liaison with them. Other activities were the ISO governance, so legal work around that, and similarly for the setting up of the W3 Data Exchange Working Group, oversight for that as well. There are two pieces of work which we started during the year, which unfortunately weren't able to be completed in time for today's meeting. And they are a review of membership rights, benefits and fees. And the proposals we brought to the next meeting, annual meeting, but I hope that we should be able to have some discussions before then around some of the proposals we're trying to bring in, some of the thoughts the exec has got around membership rights, benefits in order to retain and extend the membership. And there's also an additional funding working group, which again is in progress. And I think we're hoping to have some pre-discussions with the proposals brought to the next annual meeting. For discussion. Next slide, please. So one of the main ticket items on the budget is the priority fund, where we've allocated $10,000, sorry, and this year was awarded to Dominic Nzunda from Meru in Malawi to do some work around micro learning program for primarily the African region. That's produced some, I think, for those people who haven't seen them, I think excellent resources. We need to work out how we're going to sustain them, and I think something that the DDI training group may be taking an interest in. But certainly it's a very interesting way of presenting DDI to an audience which I think in general hasn't really been engaged with. And I think certainly the outcome from that funding and the training that resulted from that, they're reporting that 85% reported adoption barriers being addressed or partially addressed, and 3/4 of people reporting an intention to adopt DDI. So both the education and also the adoption being covered in that activity. So it's the sort of thing I think we want to be promoting, partly for the training aspect, but also for engagement into parts of the world where the Alliance as an organisation hasn't really got much of a presence. Next slide. Okay. So just a few things I think are probably important to just have some be interested to hear what people's thoughts are around this, around what the current major challenges are. From my perspective, they are the flattening out of R&D budgets. In some countries, that's been significant decline, not just the States, which has been dreadfully affected, but I think there's a lot of pressure in some of the European countries as well around R&D funding at a national level, if not necessarily entirely always at an EU level, which I think is making it difficult for infrastructures to maintain and develop. Next slide, please. But I think there are also lots of opportunities for the Alliance. I think the increasing necessity for and the recognition of the need for data sharing, reuse of data, linkage and provenancing, which is sort of some of those things are picked up in the EU Data Act, a new version of which is coming out or has already coming out or is about to be enacted, which I think is going to make some significant changes around the European data landscape, and the continuing interest in utilising social and demographic data, particularly from the health and environmental sectors, where I think there's now a recognition that the long history of data management and the DDI supports has been a key source of information, quite high quality data, which those areas are now much more interested in engaging with, and also the spinning up of increasing numbers of national data portals where I think it's important that the EDI has a voice in some way to make sure that the lessons that we've learned over 25 years in managing and disseminating data are learned and not undone and leading to sort of data silos, which is one of the things that none of us want. The other areas I think where there's opportunities are in terms of the data quality of DDI, particularly in its data that's documented DDI, particularly in its traditional strongholds of archives, national statistics, and so on, where I think computer science has gaining some interest. A lot of the main computer science conferences are now having social science, particularly strands. And I think that's an area where I think that sort of computer science and the DDI community can come together to advance some things there. And I know this has been on the topic for the UNECE group for a while, but the utilization of administrative data is something where the experience of our community, I think, can engage with some of the very difficult problems of all this sort of found data, for want of a better word. And I think the other areas obviously relates more to provenance, and that is the scrutiny of data and the unintended consequences of what's happening in the whole AI space, which perhaps we've got some time to talk about a bit later. And that's a lot, I think. So if anyone's got any thoughts or questions or ideas, that will be interesting.
John, there's one question from Irina in the chat box.
Oh yeah.
She asks, is detailed description of the metadata DDI course for micro-credentials available? We're looking for similar possibilities, and I would be interested in more information.
So the slide had the link to the portal there. I've done part of the course, and I think certainly it's something that I think they would definitely be interested in talking to. I think it's based on the Moodle platform, if I'm right. I may not be. So it should be quite transferable to a number of the sort of micro learning platforms that universities have anyway, certainly. Hilda.
Yeah, I put a link to it in the chat, what we received from the training group regarding this. And I guess also the training group are good to contact regarding this, because they have been reviewing the material from this project. So yeah, I guess that would be a good way. And I can put also the email address to the chair of the training group in the chat. Okay.
Thank you, Hilda. Was there anything else? No. Okay, cool. Do you want to move on to the scientific board reports, which has been done by Darren Bell, who's the vice chair of the scientific board, if I'm correct?
Yeah, Jared, I've just sent a request to share.
Yeah, you should be able to share, Darren.
Okay, thanks. All right, okay. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I'm going to run over an update from the scientific board. For those of you who were at the meeting last week, you probably remember Hilda presenting a similar thing. So this is really just some highlights and current progress of things that the scientific board have been working on over the last few months, and progress of particular items in the scientific work plan. So if you don't already know, the composition of the scientific board is Hilda serves as chair with me as vice chair. The members are Amber Lee from Scholars Portal, Dan Smith, Collectica, Naomi Betancourt, and Amber actually were recent joiners of the group last year, so they've been a useful addition for us. Simon Hodson at CoData and Wolfgang St. at GASIS. We also have a couple of ex officio members, Jared Lyle from ICPSR, who you all know, and Wendy Thomas, is kind of currently in charge of technical committee. So there are a number of additional contacts that we establish for specific purposes. So at the moment, I'm the kind of liaison with the W3C. I'll mention a couple more things about that in subsequent slides. For the ISO standard, the contact is Dan Gilman, and for UNSC and Modern Stats, we have Flavio Rizzolo and Arafan Gregory. So on an as-needed basis, when there are certain initiatives or certain kind of liaisons we want to make with particular communities, we designate a contact person for them. So those are the main ones at the moment. We also have quite a number of committees and working groups under the scientific board. You may be familiar with some of these. There are a couple of new ones in the last 6 months. Technical committee has responsible for overall kind of technical QA and governance. Now, traditionally, DDI Lifecycle and DDI Codebook have been developed directly under the aegis of the technical committee. Very soon that will be being refactored, so there will be individual product groups for Codebook and Lifecycle. This means that technical committee can take a more focused role on the governance and QA, and building out a robust kind of integrated apparatus that includes things like standardized deployment pipelines for software, standardized approaches to documentation. So that's going to happen in the next few months. Lifecycle and Codebook will become their individual product groups working under the technical committee. We have the training working group, control vocabularies, the cross-domain, sorry, I should know what this stands for by now, shouldn't I? A cross-domain integration working group, which works on DDI, CDI. The developers group, which has done some fantastic work over the last couple of years with a couple of hackathons. SDTL working groups, structured data transformation language, and that I think that's George Elter who leads on that, isn't that, Hilda? That's correct, yeah. RDF equivalence working group, which is essentially doing mappings between the RDF representations, questions and questionnaires. XCOS, the qualitative data group and the metadata publication groups are relatively new and are led respectively by Naomi Betancourt and Knut Vensig. The idea behind the qualitative data working group is that for some time, for the last couple of years, there's been a subgroup of CDI which has been looking at qualitative data in the most general sense. In the context of CDI, it was decided that it would be a good idea to widen the scope of that to look at qualitative data more generally across all of the product suite. This means better support for describing qualitative object collections in both Codebook and Lifecycle as well as CDI. So that's an active group that's been running for a few months now. Metadata Publish and Access Working Group it is really an attempt, and I'm summarizing and generalizing here, but that's really an attempt to standardize the way that we query and work with DDI, for example, through APIs or through handling standard MIME types. If you look at something like CESDA, I think the work of this will be invaluable, in terms of standardizing approaches to how people expose their metadata. We're still in a situation where people are doing this in slightly different ways, not intentionally, but because there isn't an overarching set of guidance and standards to say this is how you should represent your data on an API. So Knut Venstig is leading that group up, and that's a very active group that started late last year. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll shortly be instantiating a DDI codebook and lifecycle working group, which come under the control of technical committee. So in terms of meetings and events, the scientific board meets monthly online. Ad hoc meetings are possible to discuss specific topics. In terms of liaison between the executive board and scientific board, these are quarterly. Hilda and I meet with Jared and John and Steve in the main to discuss. Sometimes those can be financial requests. Sometimes they can be more strategic issues where we might need a decision or more guidance from the executive board. So they're a useful point of liaison 4 times a year. We also have an on-site meeting. I think the last one was in Budapest at EDDI in the 1st of December, and we'll be doing another one in Brussels at the end of this year. We also have contact meetings from time to time with working groups. So individuals, if they want from the scientific board, if they need or are requested to provide additional support to working groups, those meetings happens as well. And it's worth mentioning the lightning talk session at EDDI 2025. Some of you will have attended that, but we're hoping to repeat that at Brussels. That was a kind of smorgasbord of different topics delivered in 5-minute presentations. So we got some really good positive feedback about that being able to give a big picture overview of all the different activities that are happening in the scientific board and the activities that are sponsored by it. So the scientific work plan runs from 26 to 27. It's broken into 3 main areas, which are a direct reflection of the executive board strategic plan, of which there are 3 pillars: engagement, expansion, and alignment. You can tell I've memorized those. Under the engagement pillar, we have a number of specific activities. Now, signposting and marketing, stakeholder map, these are really related to more engagement with the community, but structuring some information around that, making it easier for people to find things. And as a prerequisite in 1.2, we have to basically understand who our audiences are. Anecdotally, we kind of know already, but it's good to write this stuff down in a very structured way for future reference and to establish a baseline. Now, thanks to Amber Lee and Hilda, who've done some pretty good work on baselining the stakeholder map. We did have an additional presentation on this last week. In a nutshell, we'll be sending out a document for review and consultation next week. And this essentially divides our stakeholders into 11 specific categories, statistical agencies, journals, archives and repositories. So there's some good work there. And now we've got this in place, we can move on to more intelligent design of signposting and marketing, and also in a subsequent slide, information architectures and essentially designing how our information is structured across multiple platforms within the control of the DDI Alliance. So the W3C collaboration, this is marked in green because this is done. Although in a sense it's only just started. We have actually now, in a long consultation and collaboration with W3C, established something called the Data Exchange Working Group, which is a joint W3C and DDI group. The purpose of this is to put it at its simplest, is to provide variable support for DCAT in something called Vivid, which is called the variable description vocabulary. So this will be a really, really valuable addition, not just for the DDI Alliance, but for the wider data community to provide variable level support within DCAT. There are some other things that group will be doing, but that's the big win. Reputationally, this is quite a big deal for the DDI Alliance, to have this joint group with W3C. So literally in the last few weeks, this group was set up, and that will start its work. Well, it's already started its work, but we expect over the next 1 to 2 years some formal specifications and outputs to come from that joint working group. So yeah, we're really happy that this has finally got off the ground. 1.4 is about broadening scope and opportunities for tools development. The DDI developers group was resurrected a couple of years ago and has been doing things like Nectar Publisher, which makes it easier for data stewards and metadata managers to publish data in DDI. There was a hackathon in Budapest, which was incredibly well attended. There was a room full of hot, sweaty developers for 2 days, all in close proximity with each other. And that's a really good community. So if you're interested in development and you're not involved, I'd encourage you, to get involved with that. Just drop an email to Oliver Haupt or Olof Olsen or Ingo Barco, and you'll be more than welcome to join those activities. The DDI CDI tools subgroup is working on tooling for the cross-domain interoperability framework, or CDIF. If you're not aware, there's a very significant project starting literally next Wednesday called CDIF RIOSC, which is about building an entire framework and tool chain that allows essentially graph-based metadata to be standardized and exposed, not just for discovery purposes, but for provenance, rights management, data structure, universals. So it's a very all-encompassing framework to try and jumpstart interoperability, not only within EOSC, but hopefully in wider communities as well. So they've been looking at things like Dataverse, how we can do workflows in a more structured way using something called NA10, which is a workflow engine, and looking at how that would integrate with Nectar Publisher. So I think they're not only looking at tools in isolation, they're looking at entire tool chains, and how we can actually, the DDI Alliance can help do curation better in a holistic way, as tool chains and not just tools. So with expansion, the second pillar, there are a number of activities here which are ongoing. When the DDR registry, PID usage and resolution mechanisms, this is about doing PID resolution better, making sure that it's one thing to slap a DOI on a data set, it's quite another thing to have that resolved to something useful. And there are many thousands and millions of PIDs out there that only resolve to an HTML page. I think it's taking up to another step of maturity and making sure that stuff can resolve to not just web pages, but useful data as well. So that is really coming under the aegis of the Metadata Publication and Access Group. So they're doing work on standardized MIME types, approaches to standardized APIs and fair signposting. So, the idea is to build out a DDI API, which would give very specific guidance as to how you expose DDI metadata. OAI is not going anywhere anytime soon, so that the group recognizes that and is trying to standardize the way that people use OAI PMH feeds, which I know from my CESDA experience tends to be quite idiosyncratic and varies from service provider to service provider. So that's really good work. Yeah,
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Also, in terms of expansion, looking at exploring possibilities for DDI adoption in wider initiatives, not just social sciences, which will always remain the core business of the DDI Alliance, but looking further into cross-domain interoperability. I already mentioned CDIF RIOSC, which is a major Horizon Europe project running for 3 years and starting next week. Also, we have the Quantitative Data Working Group, which is looking slightly beyond traditional quantitative data, and has been, working with Barcelona Supercomputing Center in a digital humanities context. So those are a couple of examples where the DDI Alliance is starting to move beyond its traditional core constituency, but nonetheless, the core constituency will remain that. Also, there's been engagement with the SDMX community in UNSCE to identify different collaborations. In fact, there's a conference happening in Wiesbaden this week. I think there are a few DDI Alliance members attending there, including Deirdre Longley from the CDI group. Flavio is also there as well. And the idea there is to identify practical steps for using SDMX, DDI, and DCAR in a particularly AI-driven context. And in terms of increasing the visibility of the Alliance beyond what we call traditional audience regions, by traditional we mean North America, Australia, and Europe. We have we've had a particularly nice collaboration with Malawi Epidemiology to ensure alliance with DDI Alliance training. And the training working group has helpfully translated the variable cascade training materials into French, which is not primarily for the benefit of France, but because it's a pathway into French-speaking African countries as well. 2.6, again, this is a pretty significant win for the DDI Alliance, and Dan Gilman will talk to you in more depth about this shortly. But what started out as a feasibility and scoping report proceeded much more quickly than we had ever hoped. And actually, this is now an ISO standard. So we're really, really happy that proceeded, so well and at an accelerated pace. And Dan Gilman will talk to you more about that. In terms of supporting implementation guides, the training working group has been creating more training to materials, DDI for developers. We have questionnaires and questionnaire working group creating guides and best practices. So yeah, we have some really good examples of expanding the scope of training materials. And in terms of funding opportunities, I've mentioned CEDA FreeOSC, where DDI will have an absolutely central role in that project. We're currently working on the SHOCK 2 proposal, which is going to be focusing on both life cycle and CDI implementations to build what we hope will be an actual federated infrastructure, and not just federation as a kind of vague concept. So in terms of alignment, there are a couple of things here that are ongoing. You may be aware that there's a new version 2.6 for Codebook. DDR Lifecycle 4.0, which is the RDF kind of equivalent of DDI Lifecycle 3.3. That's in beta. I can't remember if that's beta 4 or beta 5, John, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's actively being worked on at the moment. CDI version 1.1 will be out soon, which has got some kind of nice improvements and enhancements in there, and also SDTH, which is the RDF expression of SDTL, if I'm not mistaken, but I may have got that wrong.
It is focusing on history. The H stands for history, so it's a kind of a provenance tracker.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to have to fess up. I was struggling to remember what the H stood for, but yeah, thank you for bailing me out there, Hilda. All right. So in terms of future tasks, there are a number of things that are underway but not complete. The plan runs, it's from 24 to 26, isn't it, Hilda? The second half of this year, we will start working on the new plan for 27 onwards, and we hope to present that at EDDI in Brussels towards the end of the year. So we will be starting work on that in late summer. We need to follow up with technical committee and working groups on tasks that working groups are conducting in the context of the scientific work plan. And also there are occasional things we need to do in terms of approving and sunsetting of working groups. I think a recent example was the Paradata working group, so that was retired. An AI strategy is under development. I think Dan Smith will talk a little bit more about that later in the meeting. One of the things we want to do is explore deeper CESDA DDI collaboration. There are a lot of the same personnel working within CESDA and DDI on the same things, on the same working groups. So we're looking at ways that we could solidify and promote those collaborations in a more meaningful way. And as I mentioned, we'll have a physical meeting in Brussels for EDDI 2026 as a side meeting. Okay, so I think, is that the end of this slides? I believe it is. Okay, so thank you. Has anyone got any questions or thoughts on any of that?
Hilda. Oh, Hilda's way clapping, so I thought she was raising her hand.
Well, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's really great what the working groups and the TC are doing for the scientific board, and also the scientific board contacts have been very active, and you can see the result of this in Darren's presentation. So thank you very much for presenting, Darren.
Yeah, so I'd like to echo that. It's been a really busy year by the looks of it from the scientific board. Are there any questions or comments anyone wants to make? No. Oh, Steve.
Yeah, I think it's probably just important sort of making the point around reinforcing the relationship between, I mean, it's very useful for Darren to kind of work through the sort of the three areas of the strategy, but sort of looking at the expansion strategy that sort of, and sort of the connections that are there. John talked about membership, and the sort of the stability of membership, but also, thinking a little bit about how we can connect a lot of the efforts coming through the activities of the community into from a financial and sort of community building point of view, sort of that transition into engaging membership along there that follows on from that we say, and looking at that going forward. So just to sort of draw the links there, is that something that the exec will be looking at, as we go through in a couple of those working groups that John mentioned.
Thank you, Steve. Irina.
Yeah, just a practical question, and it might be that it's already taken care of, but I'll just going to ask anyhow. So I was looking at different working groups, and I noticed there's a question and questionnaire working group. So I'll check later on the work of the group, because I see also the notes are there. But I was wondering if we have any legal experts also in these groups. To be more precise, what are we dealing now, and also in direction of the discussion that we have for building the European Question Bank, is that there's a debate between metadata being CC0 license, and that question and question text cannot have this license on it because it has copyright, and how to document that in DDI. And I was wondering if anything was done on that aspect, or this is a question to go back to the questionnaire working group and figure out there.
So it hasn't been something that's been discussed by the questionnaires and question group. I think it is a very different, from my experience of this. It has a very different formation in different countries. Some countries, if it's published in PDF, you can effectively then just republish. Some things like some of the psychological scales, for instance, are under copyright, and that makes it very difficult to disseminate them. But yeah, it's just a real problem in the space, I think. I certainly think in some places the open science agenda is putting pressure down on some of these sort of places who are publishing these sort of questionnaires. Hilda.
Yeah, I don't know. As you say, you are in the question and questionnaire working group, and we are not aware on the scientific board, apart from people we know which competence each individual in the group have. But in general, we can say that in the DDI Alliance, we try to use other standards for kind of dealing with the legal stuff, so that DDI doesn't need necessarily to cover all of this, but other standards can be used maybe to do it. So at least that is one take on that. But yeah, it could be a good idea you get in touch with that group with your question, Irina. I don't know if you, Darren, have some comments to that.
Wendy's first up next.
Okay.
Yes.
Wendy.
A lot of what DDI has focused on in the past is just trying to make clear where those legal limitations or their access limitations lie and how they connect to specific objects within DVI. In the Codebook 2.6, we've added not only you have a place for describing data access, but also metadata access as a separate piece. And we have spread out means of pointing back from specific objects, from questions, from categories down, so a whole range of areas to be able to point back to specific access information, which can then point out to something external also. And there are similar things in code in lifecycle that have been there for some time with the access section in the archives, and also means of pointing back to that kind of information. Those are obviously things we may want to make clear. We may want to recommend, even using outside things, recommending those and making sure that any ways that we have of referring to them are referring to them in sufficient detail to make them functional. But I think we've been focusing mostly on how to relay that information and link it to specific items within the DDI.
Thank you, Wendy. Good. Does anyone else got any questions or queries or thoughts on the Scientific Board report? Okay. So Hilda's put the email address for Aroma, who's the co-chair of the questionnaires working group. For you, Irina, or anyone else who wants to follow up on the questionnaires working group. Right. So next we've got Jared with the financial report.
Yeah, thanks, John. Okay. Right, can you see my screen?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. So I'm presenting a financial summary for the DDI Alliance for fiscal year 2026, covering the period from July of 2025 through June of this year. This report includes the approved budget, projected year-end financials, and an overview of our current financial position as we close the fiscal year. First, I want to highlight a few encouraging trends from this year's financials. Overall spending is projected to come in below budget, which reflects careful management of resources throughout the year. Our reserve balance also remains strong, helping ensure we stay financially stable and well-positioned moving forward. Membership revenue has remained steady, continuing to provide the foundation for our core operations and community activities. And while we do expect to end the year with a small operating loss, it's smaller than originally projected and consistent with the strategic investments we plan to make this year. So this chart shows we began the fiscal year with an executive board approved budget of approximately $93,000 US. Based on current reconciliations and projected year-end activity, we forecast total expenses of approximately $85,000, or about 91% of the approved budget. Membership revenue for the year is $80,000. Overall, we forecast a modest net loss of approximately $5,000, much lower than the projected loss, and while lower than the projected loss, and well within expectations for planned strategic spending. The organization has continued to manage resources carefully while supporting operational priorities, working groups, outreach activities, and community initiatives. This shows our reserves balance. We continue to remain in a strong financial position. We began the fiscal year with reserves of approximately $322,000 US. After accounting for forecasted fiscal year 26 activity, we project an ending balance of approximately $317,000. This modest decline is smaller than originally anticipated and also continues to reflect financial management. Maintaining healthy reserves remains important to supporting long-term sustainability, organizational continuity, and strategic flexibility. The annual funding request process is already underway. So in April, we distributed the call for proposals to working groups and committees. Proposal submissions, including requests for priority funds, are due or were due in May. And then during May and June, the executive board is reviewing submissions and evaluating them based on strategic alignment, expected community impact, sustainability, and available resources. Final funding decisions and notifications will be issued in June, so groups can begin planning for the new fiscal year. And then just a friendly reminder, as discussed last year during the 2025 annual meeting of members, as well as included in all newsletters since then, the Alliance will introduce a modest 5% membership fee adjustment beginning in fiscal year 27. This is the first increase in over 10 years, and it's intended to support the long-term sustainability of the organization while allowing us to continue investing in technical development, community engagement, training, outreach, operations support, and all the other activities of the Alliance. We recognize the importance of keeping membership costs reasonable and predictable. The intent is to make small, gradual adjustments over time rather than large increases introduced less frequently. So in summary, the Alliance remains fiscally stable and strategically positioned as we move into fiscal year 27. Careful financial stewardship, strong reserves, and continued member support, and really emphasize that membership support from our full members allows us to invest in the ongoing development, adoption, sustainability of DDI. So thank you, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jared. Has anyone got any questions for Jared? Finances. No. Okay, thank you very much. Next up is Dan on the recent historic news, really, of attaining ISO status, which is something that the Alliance has been pursuing on and off for well over 10 years, I think now. So
Yeah.
Dan, you've got 15 minutes.
So Jared was going to display the slides, I think.
Yep, I'm just opening them right now.
I'll give you a 5-minute warning, Dan.
Okay.
It should be up. You see it?
Okay. All right. So this is a report on the development of the new ISO standard for DDI, which is abbreviated ISO Pass 25955, and I'll explain what all that means. Next slide. So now DDI has an ISO standard. It was published in March 2025. For those of you that don't know, ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. PASS stands for Publicly Available Specification. So the public spec, the DDI Common Core document that was developed in late 24 and early 25 was the public spec used as the basis for the standard. Next slide. So the standard was developed through an ISO technical committee called TC46, which is called Information and Documentation, and that title indicates why DDI is an appropriate place to try to standardize some aspect of DDI. And the technical committees are divided into called subcommittees, Subcommittee 4 is called Technical Interoperability, and they expressed interest in helping us move the document forward. And now that we've developed the standard, they're eager to take other documents and we might want to standardize. The standard is available for 67 Swiss francs at ISO.org, and so it does cost to get the document, but having the ISO imprimatur is a big advance for us. Next slide. So what are the advantages to the Alliance? Well, first of all, DDI is an ISO standard. You know, great, we can say this. Of course, that's imprecise, but it's a really important thing. A lot of organizations like the idea of using specifications that are ISO standards. So it aids adoption. The standard that's been developed is a pretty clear exposition of what DDI products do in general, and it specifies areas of interoperability between the DDI standards and other specs and across other standards and specifications as well. Next slide. So the standard focuses on variables, what they do, how to describe them, the differences between a description and a variable, which has been a point of confusion, focuses on interoperability, which is, of course, an advantage of using standards. And interoperability becomes more important as data access and data integration are more automated. The ideas behind the model-driven design, which eases communications, being able to update and maintain the standards. And it's a way of talking about the syntax representations in a meaningful way. Next slide. So here's the basic outline of what the standard looks like. There are 11 what are called clauses. That's the way a standard is organized. And other than the scope and the normative references, all the sections that I have listed are contained in the DDI Common Core. Next slide. So I want to say a little bit about the process because I think for a lot of people that's somewhat opaque. So for a technical committee and the subcommittees underneath, membership is in the form of national bodies, which is a committee of stakeholders that are put together per country. 31 countries are represented in SC4, and the Alliance has membership, but it's different. Of course, we're not a national body. We are what's called a Category A liaison to Subcommittee 4. And that permits us the ability to submit documents or proposals for standardization, but we don't have voting power. Next slide. So the past submissions are fast-tracked, which is one of the nice advantages of going in that direction. It's based on a document that's been reviewed and published prior to the submission by some recognized organization. But the process does require at least one technical ballot, which I'll describe. And then once no technical issues are needed, so no new ballots are required, ISO then publishes the document. Technical ballots allow any kind of comment. So ISO divides their comments into what are called technical, editorial, or general. Technical comments address the requirements in the standard, which is the most important aspect of a standard. It's what allows you to claim that you conform to a standard. And so the technical comments address the requirements. Resolving those comments, if they come, might necessitate changes in the requirements. And when there are new requirements, then a new ballot is required. So we try to avoid that because, of course, it slows the process. So we have to carefully word these documents so that we reduce the ambiguity so that these technical comments can be resolved easily. Next slide. So the what the Alliance did then to create this was to form a temporary working group to answer the question, what should the Alliance standardize? Should we standardize code book, lifecycle, or CDI? And that would require maintaining whichever project we selected in two places and under two schedules. It would require extensive drafting, a lot of repetition, and the work would be large because the standards are pretty large. So we rejected that way. So we looked at what had been done previously in other venues, and we looked at what SDMX had done, and they standardized on the notion of exchange, which of course is the X in SDMX. So the TWG focused on what's essential in DDI standards. Next slide. So we identified common core features in all the DDI products, and we recognize that the variables and in some the variable cascade is used, units and what we call the unit cascade, unit types, universes, and populations. Value domains, the allowed values for a variable, the data lifecycle, which of course is really important in DDI lifecycle, the model-driven design, which is an area that we're using in an expanded way, and then semantic interoperability around the user-controlled vocabularies. So we drafted the DDI Common Core document that was reviewed several times by the Alliance and then published on the Alliance website. And this was used as the basis for the past submission to TC46 SC4. Next slide. So we, of course, I said the Alliance reviewed and published the document. It's freely available on the Alliance website at the link that I've provided. I attended an SC4 meeting in Delft in the Netherlands in May 2025, where I introduced the document and described the Alliance. And at that meeting, SC4 approved the project. So we drafted the document using the ISO template, and all of the ISO requirements were added, like the scope and the normative references that I talked about before. There's a document called the directives. It's actually in two parts, and part two is the rules for drafting documents. And let me tell you, this thing is complex. So there is a lot of work involved in getting this into the ISO template, and you want to make sure you get it right because you don't want to deal with a lot of editorial comments around misusing it. So we put some time into that. Next slide. So when we drafted the document, we took the definitions from the DDI glossary. So all the important terms used in the standard are defined. And then we worked with the chair and the secretary for SC4 and staff at the ISO Central Secretariat. Those people are listed below. And the technical ballot, what's called DPass, the draft pass ballot, ran from September to December 2025. Ballot closed on December 9th with all 31 national bodies voting. 15 approved, 1 approved conditionally, 14 abstained, and 1 said no comment. So, given the rules that and the requirement that we resolve the comments that were provided, then it could go to approval. But there were 8 technical comments, and that required a little bit of work. Next slide. So I had some worries about this, but it turned out the process was smooth and fast. We were able to resolve all the technical comments using editorial tricks. The ISO Central Secretariat agreed that these were just editorial changes, so we didn't need a new ballot. And to my surprise, actually, it went immediately to publication. But we're not done with this, okay? Because all standards undergo a relevancy review every 5 years. This is called the systematic review. The choices each time are to confirm, revise or amend, or withdraw the standard. So the DDI 25955 will come up for review, and so we may have to make changes. There's the possibility, excuse me, that the document change from an ISO pass to a normal ISO standard. I have to look into that. So we have to have somebody ready for editor duties going forward. And I'm that named person now, but we're going to have other people as this goes forward over the years. Next slide. So I want to say a little bit about the Common Core based on general principles that describing data that all DDI standards follow. Each needs to and uses descriptions of variables. These are fundamental to describing our data. Saying variables act like functions in math, that I don't know why I put that there. Anyway, the unit cascade, the domain of a function, that's a set of units that the data describe. These are specified in the unit type, the universe, and the population. And then the range, the values that the variable take, or is the value domain. That's the set of permissible values. And these are expressed as enumerations, numeric intervals, or rules. Next slide.
5 minutes, Dan.
Okay. I think this is the last slide. So each of the standards, and for that matter, the other specifications, satisfy some parts of the data lifecycle. And those are conceptualization, design, acquisition, processing, analysis, sharing and dissemination, and then finally archiving. Of course, DDI lifecycle is designed to handle them all. And we have a table in the standard that indicates where each of these specs, which aspects of the lifecycle those specs address. Then separating the logical and physical considerations of standards is what the model-driven design is supposed to address. The platform-independent model, which is essentially a UML model CDI was developed this way. Other specs are being moved into this. Is platform independent. It's not directly implementable. But then we use platform-specific models, which are designed to handle the vagaries of each syntax representation. So there's actually a little bit different model depending on the structure rules for XML, JSON, RDF, and other languages that you might use to implement the standard. Then finally, there's semantic interoperability, which is handled through the controlled vocabularies. When you're asked to provide some description, well, if we take those descriptions from controlled vocabularies, then everybody's saying equivalent things in the same way, which very much supports the semantic interoperability. Next slide. I think that's it. Yep. So any questions?
Thank you, Dan. Jared's put a thing in the chat just to say that for designated member representatives from full Alliance member organisations, you can request a complimentary copy of the standard by contacting the Secretariat. It's an open standard, but you have to pay for it. That's the rules of ISO.
Right, yeah. That's the problem. That's the problem with ISO standards, but that's how they make their money.
And also a new logo that includes ISO.
Right, yeah, Jared can talk about that, I guess. Yeah, I should have put that on the slides. I didn't think about that.
Has anyone got any questions or queries from Dan about the process or future use of the ISO standard?
In a way, the standard doesn't change anything about the specs that the Alliance puts forward. The standard is more a kind of an extract of what it is that we do, and is common to all the specs that we have. And so in that sense, it's stable because this accounts for the work that the Alliance does. And I mean, there might be changes over time, or I think most of the changes would be additions rather than subtractions. Our approach is generic because that's what would be required for an ISO spec. We don't want to have to modify this thing all the time. We want it to be stable. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, we need to make sure that we have a hand in the ISO process because it is going to come up for review, and we are going to have to indicate that something about its relevancy, and if it has changed, make some additions.
Good.
And that's either additions or additions, either way.
Thank you very much. Well, I think it's a massive step forward, I think, and something that we've been trying to do for a long time, and it's a tribute to those involved that actually managed to get it over the line. I know it wasn't a straightforward process. Irina.
Yeah, then perhaps you had said that I needed to switch the rooms. But I was wondering on the long term and sustainability, what would we need to be careful about? You also mentioned about the voting, but
so the main thing to be careful about is whether the document remains a faithful representation of what we do. Okay, so if the alliance changes direction or the specs change in some major way, we might have to look at the document to make sure that it's still representing the work of the alliance in a reasonable way. The other thing is the systematic review that ISO standards undergo. We need to keep our contact there so that as long as we're producing work, the standard remains relevant because we don't want to lose the ISO accreditation. It's something we're fairly hard for, and so that's so we need to keep our we need to stay aware of what's going on.
Thank you, Dan. Wendy.
And one last thing. I mean, I'm not going to be doing this forever. So somebody else is going to have to take over, and they're going to have to be aware of the ISO process as well. I think Arafan and I are the only ones that really know it. And so getting someone else more involved might be a long-term advantage for the alliance.
Exactly, and someone who's not near retirement age would be ideal.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you, John.
Not me. I'm getting too close. Wendy.
Yes, I just wanted to note that one of the things that we looked at it for, because the technical committee did a lot of review of this as it was being developed and things. And one of the things that we were focusing on was that it really was a core structure, and that when you start even looking at the individual products and a lot of what we do, it comes down to a level of detail, or just how many bells and whistles are being put on something, or if it is a descriptive thing or something to support automation of processes. So there was a real consciousness in making sure that this was like a very core piece that other things built out of. And I think that that has been done with this. And I think as long as going forward, if there are new areas to look at, some of the things that Dan mentioned, or uh, question develop or question cascade type of thing. So for content capture, that making sure that that kind of common core approach, I think, is very central to this, and allows DDI the freedom then of adding on those details in various products in a way that doesn't negate or go against anything that is in this ISO core.
Thank you, Wendy. Steve.
Yeah, this is more I say I'm not sure if it's a question or a provocation, which is, for some organizations, this change of status, is kind of a requirement, in terms of adoption, so, the shift in status means that it's, falls into scope for something you can actually go ahead and adopt. I'm curious to know for whom that might be, might be relevant. And secondly, we need to think a little bit about sort of, I say, certainly I know a lot of the promotion we did at UKDS sort of, following on this actually really got, quite a lot of traction in the relevant communities that we work in. But how we actually leverage that in terms of some of the engagement efforts going forward.
Thank you, Steve. Certainly, I think one of the most important parts of the profile is, I think this, I'm still I don't think anyone really put a finger on to say this is the reason someone hasn't adopted DDI. So that's a barrier that's been knocked over. I think the other thing is the visibility of DDI as a standard that does data properly down to the data items, which is something that very few other standards really do to the same detail. And I think that's something that I think hopefully will raise the visibility of an adoption of DDI. I think it has suffered a little bit from being overshadowed by some other standards which don't always do what you think they're going to be doing at the end of the day. Cool. Thank you very much. Right, so it's me again, I'm afraid. Do you want to bring up slides, Jared? Yeah, so the scientific board, there was a discussion on AI strategy, and I think that as Darren mentioned, there's moves afoot to try to do some coordination with CESDA, and I think that's an important development. But I thought perhaps one of the things that we didn't discuss at the scientific board was the impact on the organisations of our members. And so I just want to just pick up a few points and hopefully open up some discussion around what people see as being the if you like, threats and opportunities, or challenges and opportunities, or however people want to talk about these things. So so the DDI, the member organisations are involved quite heavily in a whole number of different activities that are AI related, have been for some considerable time. I picked out a few here. I missed off Shock 2. I apologise to those people involved in Shock 2. I couldn't remember its name, so I couldn't put it down. But there is a lot of activities going on. The CESDA working group, as Darren mentioned, but there are a whole number of computer science / information science projects that are going along on. And I think that we are quite on the front foot, particularly around classification and metadata uplift and these sort of things, and evolving tooling, which is making use of AI as well. So I think we are involved. A lot of the member organisations, a lot of the people involved in DDI are already doing stuff around AI. I think not just on the technical front, but also things like staff training development. FSD are doing stuff. I think others are. I'm not sure who they are exactly. So it'd be good to see what members are doing around those areas, and what they think are are there things that the Alliance can do to bubble that up to a higher level that is and bring it to the attention of other member organisations, so that collaborations and so on can take place. Next slide, please. So I think that one of the things that anyone who's got a repository will have seen is that absolutely getting hammered by bots. It's become a bit, the number of websites now that have got Cloudflare in front of them and so on as a default, has I think made it much more complicated to do our business as normal, and also that sort of, want of a better word, theft of metadata without attribution, I think is an issue. So we've seen this already in things like in artists and music and so on, where things have been absorbed into models without attribution. And you can argue, well, they can fight for themselves, but it is public money, it is intellectual property that is being not in our control anymore. And one of the interesting things is in terms of actually using AI itself, it's actually the data pollution that's taking place, because some of the metadata that being produced is leaking into the models or being absorbed into the models, does actually complicate development of new methods and new models itself. The other area which I've certainly noticed is the traditionally curated catalogues, organized, curated dissemination is being sort of disintermediated by some search engines or aggregation portals or whatever, which we work quite hard to ensure that the standard and the catalogues allow people to have good understanding of what's in front of them and relates to the data that's being used or they're wanted to use. And these sort of portals can cause, I think, cause problems in terms of the reputational credibility of some of the sort of work that member organisations do and the value of the catalogues. I think personally there is a real danger of what I've termed, for the sake of this slide, vocabulary annihilation, where people say that you don't need to have concepts, you don't have these, you just have generic AI classification. What does that mean? I think in terms of some of the work we do and some of the standards, what does that mean in terms of the standards? Is there a pushback against the underlying rationale for a lot of the work that many of us have been doing for 20 or 30 or even longer years? One of the other areas is that where we do work with, create models and do development work to, do classification models or whatever we're doing. If those get absorbed and commercialized, are we going to be in a position where we're actually having to pay for our own work? And, as we mentioned earlier around funding flatlining, does that endanger the ability for us to actually be able to use AI because the cost of the cost of tokens has already exploded over the last few weeks, actually. But that continues along with, is that going to make some of the work we do unviable? And then I think the last thing was, is actually how do we coordinate the activities? There's a lot of good work being done, but I think it's, is there something the Alliance can do to try to help to put people in touch with each other, coordinate stuff? Is there stuff that we can do around in the models around structure and interoperability, and some stuff around controlled vocabularies? Should we do more work around controlled vocabularies to solidify the work we're doing in relation to AI? Can it help actually improve the models themselves, the standards themselves? So I would be interested to know. The last slide, please. So I think there are lots of opportunities. I was looking at Knut's paper the other day, and I noticed there's been an increase of over 60 repositories that are holding DDI even in the last couple of years. So there is definitely a growth in the availability of DDI, and that probably is represents a fraction of what fraction, I'm not sure, of actually the people are using and developing using DDI. So there's a lot of good quality, high quality metadata out there that I think, if you're going to use AI, thinking about ways in which you could use to uplift that and so on. Interoperability, as we've always talked about that as being a core part of our mission. And I think, the Publication Access Working Group, the new web-enabled serializations of DDI standards into RDF and so on, I think is something that I think will make it easier to work with AI technologies. And the interoperable standards work we're doing, and obviously the work that we're doing with W3C and UNECE, which Darren spoke about earlier. One of the things in Europe certainly is are we going to be aligning around ELST as a common denominator for vocabularies in different countries, and how do we do that, and how do we, in a sense, it's fine to do it in a language, but how do we make sure we do that across all other languages, spread the skills and experience into other languages? And again, DDI control vocabularies. And finally, the last thing I think is, and one of the things from my perspective that the Alliance is really, really good at is, the involvement of people in the DDI working groups is a really important part of people's growth and development as knowledge workers or whatever we want to call ourselves. And are there things that we could be doing around the working groups to encourage people with computer science skills, particularly, to become more involved in the work of activities of the alliance, in the working groups and the committees and so on. And there are a range of country-specific training initiatives as well as the training group activities as well, which I think AI has a role in there somewhere. So that's my thoughts. So Dan, have you got anything? I know I couldn't find your slides, unfortunately. So have you got anything you've got to say to add to that from what you said a couple of weeks ago at the SB?
Yeah, just that the scientific board is working on our own strategy for how we're going to be communicating with working groups about new capabilities that might have to be added to the products to work in this new environment. And we'll be sending out a use case survey to the members shortly.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Good. So is there anyone else got any comments or thoughts around AI and the alliance or the standards or its effect on our member organizations that we want to share? Okay. No. Okay, fine. Well, the use case survey will be going out as Dan just said. Hopefully, is that going to be over the summer? You know.
Yeah, in the next month or two.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Good. Right. So, oh, sorry, Steve.
John, I'm just thinking. I know I was just looking through the related activities as you sort of pointed out. We don't kind of, and I'm not proposing to establish this myself, but to say, is there a need for a working group here to kind of coordinate? And I say this is kind of a question, or is it? Do we let those say on some of those related activities? I mean, there's a lot of crossover between the people who are doing these things, so in a sense that may happen as happen naturally, but maybe it's not a working group, maybe it's some other coordination mechanism. But is there something we ought to be thinking about there that sort of enables that coordination to occur? I say that's a thought bubble as much as anything.
Wendy.
Yeah, I think in some extent, there is some coordination activities that could go on there in this current structure. I mean, one of the things of the technical committee peeling off the codebook development and the lifecycle development was so that they could focus more on the underlying technical infrastructures, but also the coordination between the different product groups to make sure that there was consistency, that activities that were going on in one, particularly if they were useful with the others, or making sure. So I think AI falls in there, and the things that Newton Head's group are doing falls in there to make sure that those get passed out and processed and managed in the same way within the various product groups. So I think what's possible is if there's something that's very specific, like a spearheaded movement in terms of reaching out to people, or say best practices and how to do this or something, that might be a point for a working group. But I'd say let's see where we might want to see where a working group would be very effective, rather than just here's an amorphous working group to work on this, and to do them to more pointed activities that have specific goals and specific outcomes to them. Just as an approach.
yeah, I mean, I think one thing would be that if people are doing things, new projects around DDI, which are almost developed to be AI related in this day and age, to actually publicize them through the user list or something like that, or be able to sort of do end of project reports that could be put into newsletters, summarize things like that, so that people are at least aware of the activities that are going on and can reach out to other people who are doing similar or related things for collaborations or just to pick their brains if nothing else. I think probably don't do enough of actually puffing up exactly what our own members are doing around some of these activities, particularly around research funding, for instance, or infrastructure projects. We tend to sort of talk about them perhaps at EDDI or somewhere else, but not outside of that. It's not really well communicated. Okay. Well, thank you for that. No doubt we will. I think AI will be with us for a while, so no doubt this one is not going to go away. So I've got 3 bits of any other business. One is marketing group. So the marketing group has stuttered over the last year or so. I would just an appeal for people to volunteer for that. I mean, I think as we've seen with the ISO work and some of the other activities, and we are doing a lot of things. So there's we do need some resource or someone who is interested in expanding out the activities in the marketing area. So it'd be really grateful if someone could either contact me or Jared if you're interested at all. Certainly, I think that the work the SB is doing around the stakeholder engagement mapping will be a good starting point for actually turning that into content, as well as the role it's going to play in the information architecture of the website and so on. So if people would do that, that'll be really, really good. Bit of a gratuitous plug. EDDI, we don't have a conference as an alliance, but we do have a sort of informal annual gathering at EDDI. Submissions are open now, and they're open until September the 1st. It's going to be in Brussels, organised by the State Archives of Belgium, who are who've been very good to stand up and do that work for us. So that should be a good 5 days in Belgium for those people who are interested and able to come along. Yeah, please submit your stuff by then. The other thing is mailing lists. For those people who aren't on the mailing lists, there's not an enormous amount of traffic, but it is a useful way of asking questions, whether they be seemingly simple or whatever. And certainly my experience has been that people are very good at responding to any sort of queries that arise there. So there's the user group, there's the technical SRG list, and there's also the newsletter subscription as well for those people who are to keep in touch with the activities of the Alliance over the coming year. Has anyone else got any other business or any AOBs or announcements they want to make? Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, so I think Jared, you're going to post out the when the YouTube's up and all the rest of it is posted.
Yep. When the slides and YouTube are posted, we'll make an announcement, and we'll also include those in the community newsletter, which should go out in the next month or so.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. Hope it's a bit less hot in where you are than it is in London at the moment. and see you. Well, we'll see you. Steve.
John, it's not hard.
Thanks.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Bye, thank you.